Have you ever wondered why, even after decades of marriage, your husband still looks at you like you're the most beautiful thing he's ever seen? Why he wants to be close to you in ways that feel almost too intimate to name? For many women over 50, that question carries a strange mix of surprise, confusion, and something that feels almost like disbelief. But here's what I need you to hear right now. What your husband desires most may actually be the very thing your body has been quietly waiting for too. And once you understand the truth behind it, nothing about your intimate life will ever feel the same again. Hello, I'm Dr. Emily Carter, MD, board-certified OBGYN, with over 20 years of experience helping women navigate menopause, hormonal shifts, and intimate wellness in the second half of life. I've sat across from thousands of women who walked into my office carrying shame, confusion, and questions they were too embarrassed to ask anyone else. My purpose is to give you honest, warm, medically grounded answers so you can step into every stage of life feeling confident, connected, and fully alive. Now, here's something that surprises almost every woman I tell it to. Most women believe that when a man wants to kiss them down there, it's purely about his own pleasure. That's what we've been taught to assume. But research, psychology, and everything I've seen in over 2 decades of practice point to something completely different. For most men, this act is less about receiving and more about giving. It's one of the most powerful ways he knows how to say, "You matter to me. You still move me. I want to be the reason you feel good." In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly why men feel this desire so deeply, what it means for your body and your relationship after 50, and how allowing yourself to receive this kind of intimacy could genuinely change how you see yourself as a woman. And please stay with me until the very end, because I'm going to share the single most common mistake women make that turns this beautiful act into something uncomfortable, and the one simple shift that makes all the difference. Before we go any further, if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that now and tap the notification bell so you never miss these conversations about women's health and intimacy after 50. And if today's topic feels relevant to your life, just type the number 1 in the comments below. If it doesn't, type 0. That feedback genuinely helps me make better content for you. Now let's get into it. 1. The hidden truth about why men love this act. When women sit down with me in private consultations, one of the most whispered questions I hear goes something like this. "Dr. Carter, why does my husband want to do that so much? I genuinely don't understand it." Some women ask with embarrassment, some with curiosity. A few ask almost with frustration, and every single time I lean in gently and tell them the same thing. The answer is far more beautiful than you've been led to believe. Yes, men feel physical desire. But when a man chooses to kiss you there, he's not just chasing sensation, he's making a statement. He is choosing to give rather than take. He wants to watch you let go. He wants to be the one who reaches a part of you that nothing else can touch. That moment when your breath slows, your body softens, and you stop thinking. That moment gives him something words simply cannot describe. It is his body's way of saying, "You are still everything to me. You still light something up inside me, and giving you joy is one of the greatest pleasures I know." He may not have the scientific vocabulary for it, but his instincts understand something real, that this part of your body holds more nerve endings than almost anywhere else. He is drawn to that. He wants to awaken it, explore it, and remind you both that the fire between you hasn't gone anywhere. When you understand this, something starts to loosen. The discomfort begins to soften, because what looked like a strange request begins to reveal itself as one of the deepest expressions of love a man can offer. But there's another layer to this that most women never fully consider, and it has everything to do with what this act does to the emotional bond between two people. 2. The emotional bond that grows from this kind of intimacy. A patient of mine, a woman in her late 60s, leaned forward in her chair one afternoon and said, almost in a whisper, "Dr. Carter, my husband still wants to do this after all these years. I don't understand what he gets out of it at this point in our lives." She wasn't really asking about the physical act. She was asking about meaning, about why, after so many years, he still reached for her that way. And this is where the deeper truth lives. When a man kisses you there, when he brings his full presence, his breath, his attention to your most private and vulnerable place, that is not a casual gesture. That is reverence. He is saying without a single word, I accept you completely. I want to be closer to you than anyone else in the world. And when you allow your body to respond, when he feels you relax and open, something bonds between you. He feels chosen. He feels capable of giving you something real. That is profoundly powerful for a man, especially as the years pass and physical performance becomes less certain. I've watched couples in their 70s fall in love all over again through this very act. Not because of anything acrobatic or complicated, but because one partner could still bring the other joy, and the other partner was brave enough to receive it. That exchange, giving and receiving, is the heartbeat of lasting intimacy. But here's where it gets complicated. Because even when the desire is mutual and the love is real, many women build a wall. Not out of coldness, but out of doubt. And that doubt lives in the mirror. 3. The confidence struggle women over 50 know too well. This is the conversation I have more than almost any other. A woman lowers her voice and says, Dr. Carter, I've stopped letting him do that. My body has changed so much. I'm afraid of what he'll notice. There is so much pain packed into those few sentences. It isn't really about sex. It's about the fear that her body has become something less attractive, less worthy, less deserving of desire. Menopause is real. The changes it brings are real. Thinner tissues, changes in moisture, shifts in scent and appearance. These things affect how women see themselves in deeply personal ways, and so they pull back. They say no, quietly and gently, not because they don't want closeness, but because they're afraid of being judged by the person they love most. But here's what I've learned from sitting across from hundreds of these women's husbands. He is not looking at her the way she looks at herself. He is not cataloging changes or comparing her to some younger version of who she was. He sees his partner, the woman who has walked beside him through everything, the woman who still makes him want to be in that room, in that moment, with no one else. What he wants is not a perfect body. He wants her. The tragedy I see again and again is women quietly withholding themselves from pleasure because shame speaks louder than love. And every quiet refusal, even the kindest one, lands on him as rejection. Over months and years, that distance accumulates, and what could have been closeness becomes silence. But when a woman begins to believe, really believe, that she is still worthy of desire exactly as she is, everything shifts. And here's the part that genuinely surprised even me when I first began seeing the research. 4. What this act actually does to your body. A woman in her early 70s sat across from me once and said, I've accepted that intimacy just isn't comfortable for me anymore, Dr. Carter. I think that chapter is closed. Her posture said it before her words did. Slumped, resigned, as if she had already made peace with losing something she once loved. Then she asked, almost as an afterthought, whether there was anything that might help with the dryness, the discomfort, the loss of sensitivity she had been experiencing. What I told her next surprised her completely. One of the most effective, natural remedies for exactly those challenges was the very act she had been avoiding. Oral stimulation increases blood flow to the tissues. That blood flow nourishes and revitalizes. It improves sensitivity. It encourages your body's own natural moisture in a way that no product on any pharmacy shelf can fully replicate, because it is your own body responding, not a substitute for it. Beyond that, the hormones released during this kind of intimacy, oxytocin, endorphins, reduce stress, ease physical tension, and genuinely improve sleep quality. This is not poetry, this is physiology. Women who allow themselves to experience this kind of intimacy regularly often report feeling more energetic, more emotionally balanced, and more connected to their partners in everyday life. And their partners report feeling renewed, purposeful, needed, capable of contributing something meaningful. But as real as these physical benefits are, there is a barrier that runs even deeper than the body. It lives in the mind. And for many women, it has been there for a very, very long time. 5. The shame that was never yours to carry. A woman came to see me after attending one of my talks. Elegant, warm, clearly thoughtful. But when the conversation turned to this topic, her expression changed. She straightened in her chair and said, "Dr. Carter, I was taught that anything outside of normal intercourse is simply not something decent women do. My husband has wished for this for years. I've never been able to give him that." You could hear decades in her voice, the voices of the women who raised her, the culture that shaped her, a whole architecture of belief built around the idea that her body was something to be hidden, managed, and kept under careful control, never celebrated. She wasn't rejecting her husband. She was obeying a set of rules that had been handed to her before she was old enough to question them. This story is not rare. Many women of this generation grew up in homes where the word pleasure was never spoken in polite company, where the body was a source of embarrassment rather than wonder, and those early lessons run deep. What I told her gently and what I want to tell you now is this: that part of your body is not dirty. It is not shameful. It is one of the most exquisitely designed, sensitive, extraordinary parts of the human body. What you were taught to hide was never something to be ashamed of. It was always something to be cherished. Hygiene and self-care absolutely matter, but shame has never belonged in the bedroom. The moment you begin to release it, even just a little, you make room for something far better. And once that door begins to open, the next step is preparing yourself so that when you walk through it, you feel completely safe, comfortable, and at ease. 6. How to prepare yourself, body and mind. A patient in her early 60s confided in me once, "Dr. Carter, my biggest fear is that I won't be clean enough, that something will be wrong, that he'll be put off." She asked it as quietly as if she were confessing something, and I want to give you the same answer I gave her because it matters. Preparation is not about achieving perfection. It is about giving yourself peace of mind. A warm shower, a gentle, mild cleanser, light grooming if that makes you feel more comfortable, a space that feels private and calm. These things are not about hiding who you are. They are small, loving acts of care for yourself and for the intimacy you're about to share. When your body feels fresh and your environment feels safe, your mind lets go. And when your mind lets go, your body follows. That is where pleasure actually lives, not in the physical mechanics, but in the release of worry. Some women find that small rituals help enormously. Soft lighting, a favorite scent, music that makes the room feel intentional rather than accidental. These things communicate to your nervous system that this moment is safe, that you are allowed to be here, that receiving is not something you need to earn. Preparation is really just an invitation you extend to yourself first, and then to your partner. And when both people feel honored and unhurried, the act stops being just physical. It becomes something far more meaningful. But there is still one more layer, the thing that separates good intimacy from unforgettable intimacy, and it has nothing to do with technique. 7. The secret that makes all the difference. The couples I remember most from my years in practice are not the ones who described the most adventurous experiences. They are the ones who used words like present and unhurried, and like he was only thinking about me. A woman in her late 50s once told me, "It always felt rushed, like he was trying to get it done rather than be with me." The sadness in her voice was unmistakable. But when I later spoke with couples who described the opposite experience, where every moment was slow, intentional, genuinely attentive, the word they reached for over and over was not pleasure, it was magic. The secret is presence, not performance, not technique, presence. When a man slows down, listens to her breathing, responds to what her body is telling him rather than following a script in his head, everything changes. Pleasure deepens, trust grows, the intimacy between them becomes layered in a way that physical mechanics alone can never create. For women over 50, this is especially true. The body's rhythms may be gentler now, but the capacity for depth, emotional, sensory, relational, is often greater than it has ever been. Slowness is not a limitation, it is an invitation. I tell the women I work with, don't think of this as something to get through. Think of it as something to settle into. A way of honoring the body that has carried you through everything. When you shift that perspective, the experience doesn't just become pleasurable. It becomes something you carry with you long after the moment has passed. 8. Intimacy as something that belongs to you at every age. One of the most moving conversations I've ever had in my career was with a woman in her late 70s. She and her husband had been married for more than 50 years. When I asked what she believed had kept their connection so alive across all those decades, she smiled and said simply, "We never stopped being curious about each other." There was a whole world in that sentence. For them, intimacy was never a phase that ended. It was never something they outgrew or left behind with their younger selves. It was a living, breathing part of their relationship, one that changed shape over the years but never disappeared. This is what I want every woman reading this to understand. Intimacy is not a chapter with an expiration date. It does not close when menopause arrives. It does not retire when a number on a birthday cake gets larger. It is a language, one that grows richer, more nuanced, and more meaningful the longer you speak it. And oral intimacy specifically carries a unique power in later life. It does not require the physical stamina or performance that other expressions of intimacy sometimes demand. What it requires is willingness, presence, the courage to be vulnerable with someone who loves you. Couples who keep intimacy alive into their later decades are not just happier in bed. Research shows they are less anxious, less isolated, more physically healthy, and more connected to their lives overall. Intimacy, in its fullest sense, is one of the most powerful health tools available to us, and it belongs to you, right now, exactly as you are. 9. The conversation that changes everything. A woman in her mid-60s came to see me after years of quiet avoidance. She and her husband had never argued about intimacy. He had never pushed. But she could feel the gap between them growing, slowly, silently, like a draft coming in under a door. She told me, "Dr. Carter, I thought if I never brought it up, it would just quietly stop being an issue." But the silence didn't solve anything. It only widened the space between them. What she discovered, after finally speaking her fears out loud, was that her husband had been waiting years, not for permission, but for conversation. He wanted to know what made her comfortable. He wanted to understand her hesitations. He had simply been too afraid of hurting her to ask. That one honest conversation changed the entire temperature of their relationship. Communication is the bridge between the intimacy you have and the intimacy you want. When a woman speaks her fears about aging, about her body, about whether she is still desirable, she gives her partner the chance to respond with truth instead of assumption. And what he almost always says is the opposite of what she feared. The most fulfilling intimacy is never accidental. It is built, deliberately, tenderly, through the bravery of two people willing to tell each other the truth. When you create that kind of safety together, desire doesn't have to be chased. It arrives on its own. 10. The mindset that makes all of this possible. A woman in her early 70s sat across from me once and said, with quiet certainty, "Dr. Carter, I think I've simply aged out of this part of life. It feels like it just isn't for me anymore." And I looked at her and said, gently but clearly, "Intimacy doesn't age out of you. You choose whether to keep it." She stared at me for a long moment, and then her eyes filled. No one had ever told her it was still her choice. Mindset is the foundation everything else is built on. When you believe intimacy is something for younger women, you close the door before you even look through it. But when you understand that desire, connection, and pleasure grow more meaningful, not less, as you accumulate years and wisdom, you reclaim something that was never really gone. It was only waiting. A positive mindset lets you look at your body with kindness rather than criticism. It lets you see your history written into your skin, not as a record of loss, but as proof of a life fully lived. It reminds you that desire is not measured in youth. It is measured in openness. The couples who thrive, truly thrive, in the later chapters of their lives are not the ones with the most perfect bodies or the most adventurous histories. They are the ones who choose, day after day, to lean toward each other rather than away, who choose curiosity over shame, warmth over withdrawal, and presence over performance. That choice begins in your mind, and once it takes root there, everything else, desire, connection, joy, follows. 11. A closing thought about love without an expiration date. Let's take a moment together before we part. Think about everything we've walked through today. We started by uncovering the real reason men are drawn to kiss you there. Not selfishness, not just physical craving, but devotion, a desire to give, a way of saying you are still everything. We explored how that act creates an emotional bond between partners that words alone can never build. We looked honestly at the physical benefits: increased circulation, natural moisture, the release of hormones that ease stress and deepen rest. We talked about the shame so many women were handed before they were old enough to refuse it, and how releasing that shame, even gradually, opens the door to pleasure and connection that has been waiting patiently on the other side. We covered preparation, presence, communication, and the mindset that determines whether intimacy quietly fades or quietly flourishes. And threading through all of it was one constant truth: intimacy is not about youth. It is not about perfection. It is about connection, about allowing yourself to be fully seen, fully loved, and fully celebrated as the woman you are today. Not the woman you were at 30, the woman you have become after a lifetime of living. I have watched women believe their intimate lives were finished and then discover in their 60s and 70s and beyond that the most tender, connected, joyful chapter was still ahead of them. I have seen couples find each other again, not as they were, but as who they had grown into. And it was more beautiful for all the years it carried. That possibility belongs to you too. Love does not shrink with age, it deepens. Intimacy is not something you leave behind. It is something you can choose, again and again, at any point in your life. And perhaps the most quietly wonderful truth of all: the most beautiful years of passion may not be the ones you're looking back on. They may be the ones still coming toward you. If today's conversation meant something to you, please give this video a like. It helps more women find these conversations when they need them most. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. And leave a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you're ready to begin, just type the words "I'm ready" in the comments, because you are, and you always have been.